In studio with me now to talk to us about the Communist Party's 103rd anniversary and other issues, we are joined by General Secretary Solly Mapaila. Mr. Mapaila, good evening to you, and thank you very much for your time. We'll come to the 103 years of existence in a moment. I'd like to deal with what has been topical in the last few hours. Former President of the ANC, Jacob Zuma, formally expelled from the party after 64 years of service. How significant a moment is this, you think?
That's an important moment for the ANC to begin to cleanse itself. But as you know, we called for decisiveness on this matter at the January 8th statement of the ANC early this year. And we felt that they were delaying this problem to impact negatively, which ultimately happened during the elections, because we felt that what he did was completely unacceptable from any angle whatsoever. No matter what issues he had, he couldn't have gone on to engineer a new party to contest the ANC in the political terrain when he knows very well he needed to have arrange the consolidation of the ANC, even if may have differences with this or that other leader in the ANC. So it's something that was long overdue. Yeah. We're not surprised. We have called for it, and we're finally okay that the ANC was decisive once, but it's a post facto matter for us. It's after the fact that they have acted. It's of no consequence now. We have lost the election with its impact on that.
Political observers saying that Zuma's appropriation of the ANC's former armed wing, uMkhonto with Sizwe, paid off beautifully for this new party. And of course, this is the May elections that they are referring to. Do you agree with that sentiment that the former president has exacted his revenge, whatever it is that he was revenging, but it has been sweet revenge on his part against the ANC?
Yeah, you can say that. But look, the biggest issue for us was much less about the new party that he established. The issue for us was the role of capital against the ANC and how it engineered every other significant fall of the ANC, which today the media has forgotten about it. When the so-called moonshot was established, which later on became the Pact for South Africa, or the Charter for South Africa, with the support which was not exposed from international capital, from the European Union, from the White House in America.
Who exactly were they funding?
I'm sorry?
Who exactly were they funding?
These parties, they engineered these parties. The Brandes Foundation taking the leaders that you paraded here as analysts for the elections from the same process to unseat the ANC, which came out in the name of the Moonshot Pact in the political discourse with the sole aim of removing the ANC from political power. That is the critical area. That was the foundation. That's the reason, the main reason. Of course, the other question is the conditions of the workers on the ground, the people, the working class on the ground, and how they express themselves through the electoral process. But the core was engineered by international capital, working with monopoly capital here in South Africa, with the DA as its prime expression, coordinating other parties. And we have said you can do it even today. Even now you can Google, for instance, the IEC political party funding, the fourth quarter, just alone the fourth quarter, and see who was prominently funding these new parties, whether it's your Rise Mzansis, the IFP itself. See the role of the Oppenheimer family in prepping up every other political party opposed to the ANC who were in the Moonshot Pact. That's the strategic enemy of the South African revolution, monopoly capital. And even these analysts that are talking about any other thing, they don't touch this question. Zuma was of no consequence. Of course, he had an impact on the ANC losing elections, but the primary one was the role of capital.
Some people listening to you are going to say you're downplaying the role of the former president and the new party he has formed. I want us to come to that because we're going to explore that extensively. We are well aware, based on, of course, the disclosures that are demanded by the Political Party Funding Act. We're aware of the prominent families that have been funding various political parties. We'll come to that, but I just want to finish off on former President Zuma and the MK party. You wear a very few important hats when it comes to the MK, the uMkhonto weSizwe. Some of you will say the real uMkhonto weSizwe. You were a former operative. The late Chief of Staff of uMkhonto weSizwe, Chris Hani, at the time of his assassination, he was leader of the SACP. That's a position you hold right now. How personal is this appropriation of the MK brand by the party that is now led by former President Jacob Zuma? How personal is it for you?
Well, this, I don't want it to come to that level, at personal level, but the bottom line is that in the media space, to start with, when they refer to MK, the MK, its history is eroded. MK is now represented by MK Party, which is less than a year old. And the many people who died in the struggle, in the colors, on the mandate of uMkhonto weSizwe, those people were prepared to die for the ANC, prepared to die for the people of this country, with the ANC as their instrument that mandates them politically. That includes me. I have no identity now because this identity has been appropriated by a counter-revolutionary offensive for personal interest in this regard. President Zuma working with whatever to establish this, and the courts of this country, including the IEC that has been commended for bringing good elections and so forth, disregarding this history for following basic regulations. Just because the ANC didn't know, somebody didn't say, we didn't know for that matter. If this thing were alerted, we would have opposed it from the first day, that the name of uMkhonto weSizwe be used for a political party reason. So, of course, it's personal, but I don't want to make it to come out like that in a platform of this nature, but it is personal to many other MK combatants, including those who died in the battle against the enemy under the banner of uMkhonto weSizwe. Now, this is associated with some political party. The uMkhonto weSizwe was for the liberation of our people. In fact, the oath we took was for the people of our country. We didn't even take an oath for the ANC under uMkhonto weSizwe. We took an oath to fight for the people of this country.
And that's a claim that the former president himself is, I'm sure, happy to make, that he also was deeply involved, just as you were. But I want us to take a break for a moment, and we will continue the conversation in a bit. You're watching News at Prime. If you're just joining us, we are in conversation with the General Secretary of the South African Communist Party, the party celebrating its 103 years of existence today. Mr. Mapaila, let's continue the conversation. I'm moving on from former President Jacob Zuma and what you say is the appropriation of the MK brand, the heritage of the MK, and he's now using it for his political party. Yet, this is the same person that you would have been comfortable, or let me not say you would have, whose party you would have been comfortable leading the government of national unity with, of course, via the ANC. Do you disagree with that statement that I'm making?
Well, you are misinterpreting us. When we came out, we said, and I want to clarify this matter from our extended Politburo, we said we'll not prefer whatever coalition setup we make post the elections to work with the neoliberal forces and colonial forces of the DA that represent the extreme force of capital that are responsible for the poverty in this country, for the inequality in this country. The underdevelopment of black communities is a consequence of capital, not of government or the ANC. Poverty is a consequence of capital in this country. So that was the basis. And we said these forces, on the basis of what they represent, we don't share any strategic orientation or know the future with.
Right.
So they are not our priority people to work with. Then we said we can't also work with forces of state capture and corruption that have further damaged the image of the African National Congress, represented fundamentally by those who were pointed out through a judicial process headed by Justice Zondo. In this case, that would have included the MK party.
Right.
But we said, when I went further into public engagement, we said on this question that, nonetheless, MK party, even the EFF, have no capacity to dislodge the ANC's mission. In other words, they are insignificant. They cannot transform even a village. They have no capacity to do so. On the one hand, forces of capital who are holding our resources, the wealth of our country, it's in their hands. Because in this country, 1994, there was no class transfer of power. In other words, economic power from the white minority to the black majority. Yeah. There was a political transfer of power in nominal sense in terms of understanding of political relations. In a sense that political leadership, African black political leadership took over leadership of government, but no class transfer of power. In other words, a majority of people will continue to be subjected to the authority and oppression of capital through, in the main, capitalist economy. So we have not touched that basis. That's the basis upon which we reject, on a major strategic level, the working relationship with the DA. So you can collaborate with, when I said the ANC can afford to be irritated by MK party or EFF and so forth, because those ones have no capacity to dislodge, even if they say so, even if it's their intention. But the DA expresses the interest of capital, which does. That is why capital is holding in excess of trillions of rand at the Johannesburg Stock Exchange from investment in this country, in development. So that's what we're talking about.
But Mr. Mapaila, the people of this country are going to be very confused, just as I probably am right now, that on the one hand, you refuse to cooperate with people who implemented state capture in this country. Yet at the same time, you don't seem to have a problem because you say they can be with government with you, but in your words, they don't have capacity to dislodge the ANC. Therefore, it's okay to be irritated by them whilst you're keeping them close in government, still with possible access to the very resources that were plundered. How does that make sense versus people who will say, this is now capital, we have a vested interest in this country. That's why we have not packed up our bags and left to foreign lands. We still invest in this country. We want to invest in this country, but up until there's a cleanup of government, we can't.
No, Solly, capital has no vested interest of the people of this country. They've got vested interest for profit making and maximizing that profit. That's what they've been doing all these years. They have no interest about the people in poor villages and township, how they live. That is why the single biggest program of social security in this country is launched by government, not capital, despite the monies that we have in this country, hoarded by capital, which is investing in Europe and in America, developing those countries and developing these countries here. At best, it has been an exploitative capital in this regard, and we have never tampered with it. That's the fundamental issue. We have never tampered with it. So,
whose fault is that? You've been in 30 years you've been in power for 30 years.
Precisely because capital all the time, for any time in this country, every time the movement has been trying to be decisive, they made international calls to try and say they will collapse this economy. The rent will tank, and we do something else, the rent will strengthen, and they'll say, you see, but on the one hand, it is responsible for the problems that we have. So the decisive moment for us at this point in time, when capital entered the political space. Now, in these elections, we're contesting against capital itself. It didn't hide itself from participating as an opponent of the movement. It entered the electoral space. But we still don't treat it like that post the elections. We go and engage with them as if they were not there when actually we're fighting this election against them. That's why they funded all these other opposition parties against the ANC. And therefore, capital remains the strategic enemy of the movement, and its political expression is through the DA. That's why those are strategically our enemies. These ones we can deal with, there are no problem. Do you think we can allow corruption to continue under our watch if we take over, whether MK party has brought a person or not?
Mr. Mapaila, it has happened, though.
No, under different conditions, not under our watch now. We have launched a state commission to deal with allegations of corruption and so forth. So that framework is the one that guided us, leading to President Zuma leaving office.
I wonder...
Now, we're not even talking about him in this case. We're talking about his party that he has established.
I wonder how this is likely to sit with you. The Minister of Trade, Industry and Competition, Pakstow, was in Washington recently. And part of the sentiment there, I was talking to a business person who was part of that trip, was that the GNU is so well received in America that, in fact, they are happy for AGOA to be continued.
Solly,
does that worry you?
No, I just expressed to you the GNU is a consequence of capital machination. This was stage 2 of the failure of the moonshot to dislodge the ANC. When they failed, they still needed this country because they make profit out of this country. That's the point. So it doesn't surprise us.
How does that affect your relationship, therefore, with those that are leading this government of national unity? Because you made statements at the political school, the Nehal political school, that the ones who are neoliberal within the ANC are the ones who did not listen, and they clearly seem to have the upper hand, and that's why they would rather go into government with the strategic enemies of the alliance. Who are those people?
No, it's a clear thing. I mean, well, the choice is the choice of the ANC, okay? It's a collective choice of the ANC. But take, for instance, Minister of Finance, and with due respect, it's my senior comrade. This, when he was sworn in, the first hour after he sworn in, this first interview, I listened to him. He says, he wants to say to everybody, I quote him, fiscal consolidation is here to stay, close quote. This is what he says. First interview after taking office, you know what is fiscal consolidation? This austerity measures, this is budget cuts, this is cuts for social spending for the poor people. Now, how do you think we can sustain a revolution in that form? Because that's why we needed to debate this question about the role of finance and finance capital in South Africa, the role of micro strategy, as well as fiscal strategy for the country. so that we are able to respond to the needs of the people rather than to the needs of capital. Over these decades, our capitalist economy here, presided over even by African leadership, has been serving largely the interest of capital. So that's what the problem is. That's why Washington will welcome this thing.
Finally, on Sunday, the SACP is going to be celebrating. In fact, you are going to hold a rally. Today, though, you are celebrating the 103 years of existence. I'd like to ask one pertinent question. The ANC-led tripartite alliance, is it still serving its purpose? Is it still a relevant structure?
Yeah, this is a tired question. We get it all the time. Critics of the party like this question. The real issue is that, yes, it is, because we have not achieved yet our objectives to transform this country into a prosperous country, united democracy, its people united, non-racial, non-sexist. We have not achieved those objectives that are encoded partly in our constitution. So to that extent, you still need a movement that is as wide as possible, that can reach to all sections of society to drive this particular agenda. But to the extent that that agenda itself has been hijacked by a variety of forces, in this case, for instance, by force of the GNU, in fact, by force of capital in the GNU, as well as other forces, we have to strengthen the alliance and remain vigilant and fight from inside and outside of the alliance for the transformation agenda of our country to take shape. In terms of the relevance of the alliance itself, one of the critical elements of this alliance, which is not so easy, and I don't know why political analysts like yourself, or not analysts, journalists like yourself and other senior people in the media space, don't explain this thing all the time. The concept of the alliance is based on dual membership, where the cross-membership of these parties can be sustained. That's why I'm a leader of a political party in my own right, but I'm a member of the ANC in my own right. But if another party, another member belongs to another party, is not allowed to join the African National Congress at the moment. If it goes on, and it can change, but at the moment, that's the framework. And because this relationship was forged in struggle against monopoly capital on behalf of European colonialism and imperialism. So that's the basis why this trend is not, this relationship is not so easy to end just because it's wanted by, for convenience sake, by other forces.
Well, there are those who are already writing opinion pieces, and these are academics.
They started many years ago,
and they're saying that right now, what has happened to the ANC is that it has stopped being that broad church. Instead, it is now cleaning itself so that it becomes, I guess, some monolithic structure. But that's a conversation for another day. Thank you very much for your time. Solly Mapaila, General Secretary of the South African Communist Party. Well,